All right, the question we have to dig into is whether or not LIV is hurting its players' chances of performing well in majors. We just had a brand new report drop this morning, digging deep into the numbers and finding some really incredible things when it comes to overall performance of all the players who have made the switch. And this comes right on the cusp of this week's major, the PGA Championship. And there's some really interesting points pointed out in there, especially when it comes to scheduling, with some fans calling it just wild or crazy that LIV would do this to their players. But there's also two sides to every story, and we've got to really dig into this one, because even though we do have players like Jon Rahm pointing out and saying that some of these scheduling issues are really hurting his ability to perform in some of the key majors like the Open Championship, there's also some adept fans who have pointed out, and we've seen this debate raging on Twitter this morning, of saying, hey, you know what? At the end of the day, there's a bit of cherry picking going on here. There's some things that are being overlooked. So the only way to really discover that is to dive in and look at this report line by line, look at the quotes from what was said by players, and then we'll be able to kind of make a decision of whether or not players truly are being put at a disadvantage on the LIV circuit when it comes to how they play in majors. Before we do that, of course, we want to thank this week's sponsor, Titleist, and the new Titleist Pro V1 and Pro V1X are here. It is the #1 ball, speaking of which, at this week's PGA Championship. So if you ask what's new with the ball, Titleist R&D asked players what they wanted in the new Pro V1 and Pro V1X, and they said more spin on those scoring shots into the green. And both models give players increased spin and provide more speed off the tee with more control with irons. I've been playing the Pro V1 for as long as I can possibly remember, and I absolutely love the new feel and performance that I'm getting out of this year's Titleist Pro V1. So find out for yourself. Go to Titleist.com. Everything there is what you need to know about the changes for the new Pro V1 and Pro V1X. And you can also get in there and schedule your own ball fitting, where you can get out there and try them and find out, put them, data doesn't lie, as we say, put them on that launch monitor and see which one gives you the best characteristics for your game. So now, Mike, let's talk about what this report is. So this comes from a data analyst, Ron Kloss. He did some digging. He published his full report, which we're going to put up here on screen, and I'll dig into some of the specific numbers in just a second. The full thing is on Twitter, and all the news outlets this morning are obviously picking this up and digging in to see, at the end of the day, like I said, it's hard to argue with hard data. Yep. And there's definitely hard data here that shows that majority of these players have performed less, not quite as good since moving over to LIV. But again, there's more detail to it when you really dive into it. But the quote that came from Ron, he said, the highlight here is that out of the 18 golfers that have signed with LIV and played in at least 3 majors since joining, 14 performed worse on average in major events compared to their 3-year strokes gained average per round in majors before joining. And what he's kind of insinuating here, like, okay, why? And there's a lot that goes into that. And that again could be just like kind of that headline grabber that these guys they go to LIV and then they play worse. Right, yeah. And I think him in trying to identify like what is the real correlation between going to LIV and performance in majors, one big thing that he and others have pointed out is that LIV's schedule is not doing enough to get players ready, especially compared to the PGA Tour schedule. So we're going to compare both here. But one that was pointed out, you can only take this week, right, into as your most prominent example. This week you have the PGA Championship. Right. You look at LIV's schedule. LIV was, first they went from Mexico to South Korea to a week off to the PGA. And some people say that that's just, that's not a recipe for being properly prepared for a major. All of that traveling followed by a week off and coming in without a week of competition. You compare that on the other side to the PGA Tour, which obviously whether players choose to participate in every event or not, they do have an event every week. And you're coming out of a signature event just last week at Philly Cricket, which had a stacked field. And and then you're seeing a lot of those same names are coming over to Quail Hollow this week for the PGA, obviously in competitive form because they all just played together last week. And obviously the travel is far less intensive.
Yeah, that's true
because
too.
you're going from Pennsylvania to North Carolina. Prior weeks they've been in Florida, but they've all been stateside. They're not jetting all over the world.
All right, let's break this down because I'm thinking about it. You're absolutely right in the fact that the signature event at the Philly Cricket is probably the ultimate, kind of prep to go into a major, right? You're playing against the elite, right? Not everyone's there, but you're playing against the elite. So I do give the PGA Tour guys the advantage there. Where I kind of don't agree with this is that, first of all, let's take a step back. I think a couple years ago, I remember like Phil, Brooks, they were all in the running at the Masters. I think there was a lot of LIV guys right in the running. Reed almost made some noise this year. Yeah, they're not. I don't think any LIV player since going to LIV has won a major. I think that is accurate. I believe that is correct. I think Phil won one before he went to LIV. Rahm won his Masters before he went to LIV. So maybe there's some truth in this.
Bryson.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot about Bryson. But Bryson was the only one. He won the U.S. Open. To me, he stands in a different category.
And when we dig into these numbers in a second, you're going to see he also is the outlier.
Okay.
But go ahead.
So I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about to each their own, right? A guy like Brooks, I could see him taking the week off after Korea and doing his own type of prep, and that's how he gets ready for the game. So I don't know. I looked at Rory. I think Rory played a couple weeks, won the Players, and then he took a week off, and then he went to the Masters and he won it.
Well, at least in there, I think the point being made is that they have that choice.
They do.
We heard Tiger for years always talk about this and how he wanted to be, playing in competition is a totally different thing than having that time off, and how he felt like he can be more competitive in majors by doing that. Let me do this first. Let me tell you what Ron Kloss had said, and then I want to point out some of the highlight numbers that were from that particular data analysis that he did. He said, one thing that hasn't been said enough is how poor of a job LIV has done in preparing players for majors. Even from a scheduling standpoint, it's so far from ideal to go from Mexico City to Korea to no event the week before the PGA Championship. So that's kind of like what I had indicated before. Now, if we take a look at the actual breakdown of the data, what he showed was that you had 3 players who have performed better in majors when it comes to strokes gained and their average finish, or actually 2 of them on their average finish, since going to LIV in this category. Now, I'm just looking at this entire list, right? He said he wanted to hit some highlights, and this is all in his tweet that came out this morning. You had John Rahm has been a significant performance dip. He's lost 1.5 strokes on average. Brooks Koepka, 1.3. Dustin Johnson, half a stroke. Cam Smith, 1.39. And the list kind of goes on and on. Again, with only Bryson DeChambeau and Hatton being guys who have their strokes gained has been better. So, but I'm looking through this entire list here, and I think a couple things that stand out that we're going to get into in a second. Like, some of these guys, an argument could definitely be made that some of them had been on the decline before even making it over to LIV. Some of the guys towards the end of their career, guys like you got Sergio Garcia, Phil Mickelson, Martin Keimer. They're all on this list. But again, you look at this thing, you look at this, and you say it's very hard to debate the fact that there's something here. There's something to be said. And this doesn't even necessarily need to come from, which you'll see if you read through all of the comments and all of the tweets back and forth, is that there are a lot of people who use this type of thing as a headline grabber if they're anti-LIV to really rag on LIV.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I think there's something that you can do opposite to that, which would be use this as a way, and LIV has said this before, they consider themselves a startup that are always making changes to do things better. Is this something that can be acknowledged as a possible reality of an issue and addressed in a way that LIV reworks and creates its schedule? If scheduling truly is a problem where guys are not prepared enough or the travel is too intense in some of the weeks leading up to it, Can that be something that can be simply looked at this, say, okay, that's a point to be considered, rework it,
Yeah.
and find ways that these guys can be better prepared with a schedule that better matches that?
But what would better prepare them? Like if you can go back 3 weeks, is it just to not go to Korea or flip them so you're at Mexico, which is closer to the United States to get, you know what I mean? Like how would they make it better for them?
Well, let's look at the schedule and then let's even hear from the players themselves. So first, you had John Rahm, right? And this is coming from him last year, talking about the performance in the Open Championship. And he said, there's so much that goes into adjusting to links golf, getting used to the greens and the ball reacting on the ground. I didn't think about it until after Troon, but it's undeniable how much it helps to play a links golf course in the week before the Open. Specifically, he's calling out there the week before the Open. And again, this is something he's saying, like, if LIV being a new league and they're going to learn as they go and they're going to try to constantly improve, even John is pointing out, I didn't think of it until after the fact. But you contrast that with the PGA Tour, which has the Genesis Scottish Open the week before the Open Championship.
Don't they include LIV guys?
The Genesis Scottish Open? No.
That's a PGA Tour event.
It's a,
I
what
thought
do
it
you
was
call it?
DP World Tour.
I believe there's FedEx Cup points that are given for that event.
All right.
It's on the PGA Tour schedule.
Okay, so they won't be allowed into that.
And regardless, I mean, I think even if it was DP, it would still be a problem. I don't know where that stands.
Right,
but
right.
regardless, what I'm saying is that you'll get guys who will go there and they'll be able to prepare by playing links golf and doing in competition. LIV, on the other hand, does have an event the week before. It's Valderrama in Spain, but it's not a links course. It's a course that plays more similarly to some of the other courses that we're seeing on the LIV schedule. So you get that directly, like kind of from the horse's mouth. And I think I've even heard, I don't have a direct quote here, but I've heard guys like Cam Smith say something similar, that there's a key, if you're going to like kind of cherry pick what can be done better. A key example is shifting that schedule around a little bit, and maybe you have LIV Ireland the week before or something to that effect. The other thing is you got these huge gaps in the schedule. So this one I think I found really interesting, kind of stood out to me. LIV has only, and I'm looking at the schedule now, LIV has only one event between right now and the U.S. Open. You know, we're talking about the PGA Championship, which is this week.
Yep.
But LIV has only one event, and that's the LIV Virginia, between now and the U.S. Open at Oakmont. So could we potentially be talking about the same thing, that these guys are coming in not in form, not in competitive form, they're cold because they've got so much time off. And since these guys are effectively banned from playing in other tours, or other than maybe jet setting across the world and playing in an Asian tour event or something like that in order to stay in competition, but then you have the travel that comes into it. And you think about if there's guys in the field who are not already qualified into the PGA Championship, but maybe they're working their way through U.S. Open qualifiers and qualifying their way in like that. It's conceivable that you could be playing for LIV and have 3-4 weeks of competition off before you get to play in the U.S. Open.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Right? So that's a big one. You compare this directly to the PGA Tour schedule. They have 3 events, including one signature event, between the PGA Championship and the U.S. Open. Obviously, all of them are stateside events. They're all traveling here
Do you know what the event is right before the U.S. Open?
On which schedule?
PGA.
On the PGA, I've got to look back through the schedule, but you've got, I think it's the Travelers is in there as the signature event. Then there's one more event.
Travelers is the week after U.S. Open.
It's the week after. Okay, so there's one more signature event the week before. I'd have to look at the schedule. And without my iPad, I feel completely lost this morning. But yeah, you have that. So again, it's pointing out that there's clearly, if you look at the data, there is some sort of issue here. There's too many guys who are in the red for it to be completely deniable that there's something. Plus, you're hearing directly from players like John Rahm who are pointing out that they could be better prepped by playing appropriate events leading up to these majors. But like I said, there's 2 sides to every story, and you do have a lot of solid points that are being raised, especially out there from fans on Twitter, of how you could see this the other way. And I'm sure there's certain players who feel the opposite way.
Sure.
This is why a lot of them made the jump to LIV. So let's do a quick break there, and then let's come back. And then I want to talk about each one of those counterpoints to see how much of an effect this really has versus how much of this is a headline grabber.
All right, it's already changing the game on tour, and now it's ready to transform yours. Guys like Justin Thomas are wearing the all-new Hyperflex from FootJoy, which offers a terrific blend of athletic style, flexibility, and targeted stability. We saw JT made the switch. The guy won. He's back in the winner's circle. It's got to tell you something. The shoes
Another
are
big
great.
finish last week, too.
Yeah, he was right up there in the hunt. I really thought he was going to pull it out, but I'll tell you something. These shoes are great. We're loving the Hyperflex. We've been wearing them for the past 4 months. We've been traveling around, playing a lot of awesome golf in all different terrains, like desert golf. We were out in Oakmont not long ago, but we were just all over the map playing golf. And let me tell you something. When you are on your feet a lot, you're playing sometimes 36 a day, buddy's trip, whatever it is, you need something that looks good and it's comfortable. I call it out-of-the-box comfort. You don't have to break them in. That's what Hyperflex offers. And they got that True Fit system that allows you to just lock in the ground and grip it and rip it. So go check it out. Go check out the colors. They got sizes for everyone. Go to their website. Go to footjoy.com. Check out the all-new Hyperflex and pick up a pair today.
All right, guys, this is exciting because we're working with the PGA of America to get you early registration for the 2026 PGA Championship tickets at Aronimink. And what registration does is it puts you ahead of the general public with a preferred place in line to purchase tickets once they become available in May. And all you have to do is go to golficity.com/PGA to get registered. Registration is absolutely free and does not obligate you to purchase tickets. But like I said, what it does do is it secures your preferred place in line. So getting registered is an absolute no-brainer. On top of that, Mike and I will be there at Aronimink in Philly for the 2026 PGA Championship. So we're definitely hoping to see a few of you there. And remember, this is a major championship, so tickets are going to sell out fast, and early registration is your way in the door. So make sure you use our link to get registered, and we will see you there. All right, during the break, you checked real quick. So that's the Memorial. It's
Jack's event, which I think is for them is a great warm-up for Oakmont. You know, we just experienced Oakmont. We played it at Media Day, and we know it's going to kill these guys. I mean, it destroyed us. So I feel like Jack's place at Muirfield is going to be a good test for them. So
you, like I said, you contrast that to having the time off. Which one is better? So let's talk about a couple of quick points that people have made again since that this report hit hard and everyone's like jumping in to debate it. And again, this is where I keep coming back to. I'm saying like, yes, I get why there's such a big debate because everyone wants to prove if you take sides. I'm a PGA Tour guy. I'm a LIV guy. Whatever it may be. You take sides and you try to use this as evidence for or against your case that LIV is either better or worse. I'm seeing it as a different way and saying, like, can we take this evidence and just say, is this a way that LIV can look at it and say, hey, can we make some adjustments that make it better for our players? Or maybe they're missing. Maybe players are saying it's not that big of an issue. And it's a whole other thing, like, or it's nothing. And one of these points that point out, one person pointed out saying the issue here is that it's basically too small of a sample set. What they pointed out was that you could, in theory, go through the list of PGA Tour guys over the last 3 years and find 14 guys that have performed worse. Examples that a lot of people have pointed out: Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, Matt Fitzpatrick. All guys who have had less than what they would like to see their performance level be in majors over the last, couple of years over the same data set timeline. Yeah. So with again, with the PGA Tour, if you were able to cherry pick now on this side, though, they're not really cherry picking on the LIV side. His data is very, specifically lined out. As he says, these are guys who have signed with LIV and have the qualification of playing in at least 3 majors since joining. And then he'd compare that to their 3 years of data before. So you're going to skew any data if you cherry pick, but there's some point to be made there that there's guys even on the PGA Tour who have struggled and they're big names that it could look, tough. The other one, we mentioned this earlier in the show, but something that a lot of people pointed out, that out of these 14 names, there are a number of names that were already in decline when it comes to their performance. And you could largely argue that's because they're towards the end of their career. That, they already were struggling in majors before they made the jump. And great examples of that would be Martin Keimer, Bubba Watson, Sergio Garcia, all guys who are fantastic in their own right, all guys who are major winners, all guys who have had incredible careers, but they're all getting older now. You know, Bubba Watson was technically like relegated out, of the league, right? His performance just has not been stellar. And these are outliers that I don't know if they necessarily are able to be put into that concept of the schedule being the problem versus a guy like, I think a great case is Jon Rahm, who was at the top of his game before going to LIV. It's true that his performance in majors has not been great since. And he's the one we're hearing directly from saying like it would be better for him to prep playing a links course the week going up to the Open Championship.
Did you see that recent stat on Jon Rahm? He's finished in the top 10 in all 17 of his LIV starts.
Yes, I did see that.
I mean, so he's playing well over there.
He's playing well, but it's not translating to majors.
It's not translating to majors.
If I go back to that list, I think he had one top 10 in a major since going to LIV.
Wow.
Okay. If I look back at that data, so he had one. So the other one is there's this debate, and this could very well be player-to-player preference. And this is something, again, like I say, as the dust settles more and more and we decide what's going to end up happening with these two leagues and people decide which place they are going to go, there's this debate of which is truly better. Is it better to be playing competitively in a similar style event leading up to a major, or is it better to have the time off and prep in your own way? As you said, like maybe it's flying into Augusta the week before and playing,
I think it's player
very
specific,
player specific in that way. There's certain players that are going to want to be playing in competitive golf to play in form, and there's going to be other guys. And this is where don't forget, a lot of the guys who did make the jump to LIV use the schedule as the key selling point of why they did it, of saying that the PGA Tour schedule, especially with what became like these mandatory signature events, became too grueling and they were too worn out from constantly playing and constantly traveling. Now the PGA Tour travel schedule is, I would say, a little less grueling because, as I said, they kind of make their way around, and it's not from one to another. You're not circling the globe like you are with LIV. But there's going to be guys who are saying, like, I would rather have 2 weeks, 3 weeks off before a major to prepare in my own way than have that. And that could be very player dependent.
It could be. And I want to ask you this. This could be a fun one because you're no tour pro.
Right.
I'm no tour pro, that's for sure. But if you were, we just played Oakmont. The U.S. Open's going to be there. We know how hard it was. It was a challenging course. Would you rather have played in, say, the Truist the week before, down, maybe 2 hours away? Or would you have rather loop around Oakmont with your coach, your strength coach, your hitting coach? Which one would prepare you better?
I would be far better prepared staying in competitive golf.
Interesting.
I would 100% because, first of all, you can get plenty of intel on a golf course. I think there's only so many times you can play the course where you're actually diminishing returns at some point, right?
So you're saying the practice rounds are good enough?
Good enough. Okay. I think you get a number of practice rounds. I think almost every one of these guys at some point previews the course in the months leading up to it. They fly their private jet down there. They get when we were at Oakmont, it's a perfect point. We were talking to the caddies, and most of the caddies there, they have a great local caddy program. Most of the caddies had over the past month caddied for PGA Tour players who come in. It's not super announced. It's not like where you even know they're there, and they'll get one of the local caddies and have them take them around the course to get their legs wet, or they'll send their caddies in advance and have them walking the course. I think that when you have that competitive nature, right? I think that there's just such a different vibe of a practice round versus being in competition. And I think I would more so slump if I fell out of that rhythm of competing. If I'm competing with these guys week in and week out and playing competitive golf, at the end of the day is its own separate animal than just a round of golf. So I feel like I would feel like I needed to almost like ease back into it or warm up back into it if I had 3 weeks off and then all of a sudden I'm playing in the major.
That's an interesting point because I feel like on the opposite side of that, it could be so mentally and physically taxing to come off of a big week where you played the course 6 times, including the 4 rounds. You might have been in the hunt, a lot of media, busy week, get back on your travel, and you head up to Oakmont, and then you got to do it all over again, and you get the practice round only. Yeah. So I could see, because I'm in the opposite camp. I feel like I would give up the week before, and I would go do my recon, and I would feel one with that course, and feel like that confidence is like, all right, I've been around this. I looped this thing 4 more times than everyone else coming in here. Yeah. I think I got this.
And there's
But
a
everyone's
lot of
different.
guys who fall in that camp because a lot of guys will take off the week before a major, which is why you've seen the schedule be as it is on the PGA Tour, where oftentimes it's not a signature event the week before a major. So there's a lot of different ways to approach it. But that said, I think if I'm putting myself in their shoes, if I took like this week's PGA, I don't think I'd want to be playing in Mexico. That the time change flying all the way to South Korea, flying back, having a week off, and then trying to get back geared up for a major.
Because you got to make sure you don't just put your feet on the couch in that week off. Or at least you hope.
Right.
Before you head to a major.
And I'm sure they do have a game plan, but there's still that's tiring. And likewise, to have so many weeks off heading into the US Open on LIV. So again, I think that there's definitely some truth to what this data has identified, which is that there's some ways that the LIV schedule can be improved.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I also think that there's some degree we have to take this with a grain of salt and say that, it's better to look at it on a player-by-player focus than look at it and say, like, oh, the majority of guys who've gone to LIV are playing worse now in majors.
If a LIV player wins this week, does that take this whole thing and throw it out the window?
So
does it take just one win, or does it take a win, maybe another top 3, a top 5 in there? See Brooks in the mix. Do we need a bunch of guys?
Again, it's like empirical versus subjective,
Yeah,
right?
true,
Like at the end of the day, that one win wouldn't skew this data too far. And if you looked at the data holistically, you'd say there's still a problem here. But from more of a uplifting standpoint for the league and stuff like that, yeah. And I think there's a lot of guys, at the end of the day, I'm not betting against them. I think there's a lot of guys in there, John Rahm included, of course, Bryson DeChambeau, who, as we didn't get too deep into, but if you look again at that data, Bryson is kind of the outlier. He's performing much better, and it almost makes you wonder, is there a case study to be studied there and that other guys can pick up from Bryson and whatever he's doing to prepare for majors, because he's playing better. It's not like every single guy who's gone to LIV is playing worse.
Absolutely.
So anyway, like I said, it's a very interesting. I when I saw the data and I saw some of the debate that was coming out, it was something I said we had to kind of talk about here. And most importantly, I want to hear what you guys think about it. Let us know in the comments. Do you think that there's actual something to be identified here and that LIV should use that to rework their schedule going forward? Or do you think, again, it's just something that is just fleshed out in the fact of it just happens to be this way for these 14 to 18 players? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you in the next one.